Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Aftersight. I'm your host, Penn Street. I want to give a huge thank you to every single one of you who donated to Audio Information Network of Colorado on Colorado's Gives Day. If you missed out donating during Colorado's Give Day, it's not too late. You can just go onto our website and donate straight from the homepage. So it's really easy. Just go to aincolorado.org. Thank you all for all your support so that AINC can continue to be free, as well as the devices that we get to hand out. Today, I have an incredible guest. She's an amazing young woman, Charis, and Charis is an extraordinary person that actually gives me hope for our future. It's so wonderful when I get a chance to talk to young people that are really changing the world in so many ways. And Charis is definitely an example of that. Her passion for science is contagious, even for some of you out there that may not believe me at the moment, but by the end of the podcast, I think you'll have changed your mind. So stay tuned, and when we come back, Charis will share the journey into her vision loss, but she's also going to share why using her brain and her skills and her new techniques is really, really going to change the world for all of us. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Aftersight with Penn Street, an AINC original podcast. If you enjoy what you hear, please visit aincolorado.org for more shows, news, and articles read by our amazing staff and volunteers. If you have a question for Penn or would like to recommend a guest for future shows, please visit aincolorado.org/podcast-guest. And now, here's your host, Penn Street.
Charis, welcome to Aftersight. And I know you are sick. You are so sweet for coming on during your break from school and also being sick. But welcome to Aftersight.
Thank you.
So, Charis, I love to start off the show with some quick fire questions to my guests so that the audience can get to know you just a little bit before we dive deep in. Is that okay?
Yep, that's great.
Okay, awesome. Are you a cat person or a dog person?
Dog person.
Okay. And I know
Definitely
you just got your
person.
first guide dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
So lucky for him, right?
Absolutely.
And we'll talk more about, more about your four-legged friend there here in a little bit. Charis, are you more of a group project kind of person or a solo project?
Probably more solo most of the time, I think. I mean, but it can be situational, right? Because sometimes like it can kind of depend on what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, it's always curious. I'm always curious about that question because I love working independently. Are you more of a leader or a follower?
Again, I think that's a situational kind of thing. I don't think I really fit one particular role.
Mm.
Well,
hearing you hearing you at the convention not too long ago, it seemed like you were more like a leader, but I also think that good leaders need to be good followers. So that makes sense. So are you math or science?
They're kind of one and the same. You can't really have one without the other in most cases. So I'd say both.
Good answer.
Am I allowed to say that?
You are totally allowed to say that. Me, on the other hand, I love math, but I do think I agree with you that you can't have science without math. But I always loved math, and it always came really easy to me. So I was one of the nerds over in the corner. So, Charis, the other thing I always ask my guests is music is really important to me. And I'm always curious, if you had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. I have no idea. Although one time I was in I don't know if it was a Cabs thing or a Nabs thing, but someone started playing the chemistry song from forever ago. Does the whole, hydrogen
Oh,
and helium and lithium, beryllium, all of that.
yes.
And so I mean, I
Yeah,
think that fits me pretty well. I think that'll do.
that sounds good. That sounds good. Well, Charis, thank you again for being here on Aftersight. And I know you finally get a little bit of a break from school and relax and everything. So I really appreciate you spending some of your time with us here today.
Absolutely, I'm excited
So,
to.
oh, good. And we met briefly. We didn't spend a lot of time together at the Colorado National Federation of the Blind Convention, just like I think it's been like about a month ago.
About a month, yeah.
And yeah, and you received one of the scholarships. And so you got up and you shared a little bit about your story and stuff. And it really blew me away by not only your story, but by the confidence that you shared with the audience and, just the inspiration, and you just seemed like you had your life together. um, but I know that your vision loss is very new to you. And so that also struck me because you seem like somebody who was just so confident in your skills and this new life you've kind of been thrown into. Can you share with us a little bit about when you got that diagnosis? And it actually took you a while to even go to the doctor, right? To get that diagnosis. And how in the world did you do so much in such a short period of time?
So it was kind of a confusing thing. I didn't initially really know what was going on. I knew that I was having some vision problems, but I didn't know the extent of them. I'd never really been around blind people, and so I didn't understand, like a lot of sighted people, the spectrums that blindness is. So in my mind, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, you can see or you can't. And obviously I can see. So let's figure this out because I don't have the money to go get new glasses right now. I just figured that my prescription was changing, and I had already lost my vision in my right eye several years prior due to a blood clot. And, it took me a little bit to get used to the equilibrium difference that caused and things like that.
Yes.
But I got it figured out, and I was, just kept on keeping on and going forward from there. But back in leading up to 2019, my vision had been slowly getting worse, and I didn't really know what was going on. And it's the kind of thing that I think, from what I've learned since, that your brain kind of tries to adapt for what it can't see for a while to some extent. And it had gotten to the point where it was really starting to interfere with school. I already got some accommodations that allowed me to get some assistance from my access center, and that was helping, but it was getting to where I couldn't see the board, and I couldn't read my notes in regular size print on my computer. And so I had searched around on my computer. I found the magnifier. I was making things bigger. I had started taking pictures of the board so that I could save them to my computer and blow them up and see what I was doing. But it never even crossed my mind, really, that it was something more than that. And then one semester, as all of this was getting worse, I was hired by the Accessibility Center at my school to be a reader scribe for someone else who was blind for their chemistry lab. And
explain to our audience what a reader scribe is.
So a reader scribe is when someone is blind, they are someone who can read material from hard copy print and then write down the responses back onto that hard copy print. When it's not in an accessible form, say on the computer, it can just be done verbally. It's used a lot also for, tests and exams and things like that as well. And
So so they hired you as a reader scribe,
yes.
even though you,
well,
wow,
they didn't
even though
really
you were at the beginning.
they didn't know the extent of my vision loss at that point. I didn't really understand the extent of my vision loss at that point. I hadn't thought anything of it, and I hadn't really shared how bad that had gotten past what I was already getting accommodations for, because, I wasn't using a cane. I didn't know any of that. So I was just pushing on, so I didn't really, I didn't really know that it was something that might be a problem. And so, I accepted, and let's be honest, I needed the work study. The money helps when you're a college student to help pay the bills. And
absolutely.
So I accepted, and I met them prior to classes, and we started getting things ready, and then we delved into the semester. And pretty quickly she realized that I was doing things in kind of a different way. So all of a sudden I'd hear her saying, hey, Charis, why are you taking pictures of the board? Because she could hear me, taking pictures with my camera, and then I'd blow them up so that I could see what the board said for her and write down notes for her. And then another time, we're working on reader scribe stuff, and she's like, hey, Charis, why is your nose so close to the paper? And because I literally practically had my nose touching the paper at that point to read the print to her. And, so over time, she was kind of seeing these different things and asking me questions about it. And one day, finally, she kind of pulled me aside when we were working, and she said, this isn't normal. You need to go see a doctor. So I followed her advice, and I did. And sure enough, I was already well within legal blindness. I was 2400 in one eye, movement at 2 feet in the other. And I'd just been going on doing my thing. And, I think that had I not met her when I did, things would have been a lot more difficult for me, because she really gave me that jump start into, the resources that would help me to, continue on, living my life to its fullest extent. So she got me set up with where I could get training. She got me set up with DVR, got me all the resources so that I could call them and get started with those programs. She, and it was so sweet of her, but she kept me on as a reader scribe that entire semester, despite the fact that I was struggling through the whole thing. And, honestly, I can't thank her enough for that.
Wow. So this happened in 2019, correct?
Yeah, my diagnosis was in 2019 when I first went to that doctor.
Wow.
And yeah.
Oh, it's just so impressive to me how quickly you I don't even know if accepted is the right word, but how you moved into this new life, into vision loss. And I mean, your whole world changed. So, what were some of the first steps that you did to make sure that you were beginning to get those tools and those trainings so that you could live your best life?
Well, luckily, I was introduced to Colorado Center for the Blind so that I could go and get blindness training. And that was absolutely, very, very important. It really set the foundation for me to be able to grow on it, and I needed that. I'll be honest. I spent a lot of time in tech class. A lot of my time was spent just learning how to type, because I'll be honest, I took typing in 7th grade, and I cheated just like every other person in the class. I looked at the keyboard when the teacher wasn't around, because it just seemed so silly to have to learn how to type as a 7th grader without looking at the keys. And when it was printed right there on the keys, it made zero sense to me at the time. So that was something I had to completely relearn how to do. And you definitely cannot cheat when you can't see anything. So it was a learning process, and it was frustrating at times. But then I was learning Braille, and that was a whole new thing. I remember my very first Braille class. It was like I'd be trying to read those first 5 letters in the McDuffie. And you'd go 10 minutes and then your fingers are numb. But over the course of the 9 months or so, your fingers really start to build up that stamina. You get more used to it. But there were times where I really questioned, am I going to be able to do this? Because it's a lot. Like, you really feel like you're starting from scratch when you used to be able to, do everything as you needed to. You really feel like you're going backwards, and it can be very overwhelming and very frustrating, and it can really just make you feel like you're never going to be able to get to that place again. But I even had one point where I asked myself, well, maybe I should see if I can move in with someone, because how am I going to do all this on my own? I live by myself. And that was, I think, one of the first really important decisions that I made, was that I did not want to lose that independence. And I was worried that if I did make that choice to move in with someone and become fairly dependent on them, that I would not be able to go back to that full independence. And that was something that I was not okay with. I wanted that independence. So I made the decision right there and then that I was not going to move in with someone else. I was not going to, move out of my apartment. And believe me, there were some crazy times. I remember one specific day I had made homemade baked beans in the crock pot, and in the process of trying to transfer them to a bag, they spilled all over my kitchen floor. All that molasses, all that sticky, all that everything. And I just remember trying to clean all of that up when I couldn't see it, and just the mess that it made. And, it's hard. You run into those kind of things when you're learning the techniques that are going to work for you as a blind person.
Yeah. Well, even when you have the technique down, you can still make those messes.
Yes.
So,
yes. And
yeah, but I think they are more frustrating early.
Yes. And so, so I made that decision. I went to Colorado Center for the Blind. I got my training there. And then I started, going back to school. COVID hit right as I was getting done with, about a week before I graduated from Colorado Center for the Blind. And I was also going to school at the same time. At that point, COVID hit. So I was going pretty much 120 miles an hour. And then COVID hit, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. All of a sudden, school wants me to use these platforms that I have no clue how to maneuver. And that was what really gave me the push to start working with DVR's services as well, because of all the changes that occurred and the things I needed to learn how to use very quickly when COVID hit. And I'm still using DVR services. It's really helped me to increase, my knowledge for technology, for Braille, for everything that I need to use for my education, and that I'm sure will carry on into a career later on.
Yeah, and for our listeners, DVR is the acronym for Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, and it's a federally funded program in every state in the United States. It's really a great program for people who want to go back to school or change careers, those kinds of things, that are living with a disability. So definitely a big shout out to DVR. I'm really glad you have them, not just had, but have DVR. They really are a great resource for all of us. I've been through their programs actually several times because right out of high school, I went through their program. And then later on as an adult, when I lost, a huge chunk of vision overnight, I went back and got some more skills. So it's really not just a one-time deal. Like Charis, I don't know if you know that, but if later on, your career changes, your situation changes, you can actually go back through and get those skills, kind of updated and reset if needed.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you get excited about the STEM program?
Well, it didn't happen all at once. I think my very first plan was to be a teacher, and that changed very quickly. I figured out pretty quickly that, I'm not I'm not the most comfortable around a lot of people, whether that be kids or not. And I just found out pretty quickly that was not an avenue that was going to work very well for me. And then I think I had a point where I wanted to be a sign language interpreter, and for whatever reasons, I don't even remember anymore, that ended up not being an ideal path either. And so I ended up going to community college for an associate of science degree. Because I'm like, oh, I like animals, so I probably like biology. So let's just go that direction. And
Yeah.
I didn't really know what I was getting into. And so I started studying that. I took, my basic biology classes. I took some basic maths that I needed to catch up on. I, did what I needed to do for the requirements for that degree. But it wasn't really until I went to Metro that I found chemistry. I
Oh,
went there, and one of the prerequisites for a biology degree, which is I think what I started out going for, was chemistry. And I went to chemistry, and it was not easy. It's really kind of like learning a new language at first.
mm,
But I really, really loved it. I relished in the way that it worked and how it explained the biology that I had learned. And I really just
yeah.
was so entranced by the chemistry that I kind of was like, I need to move things around because this I love this. Like I'm
Uh,
cool with the other stuff. It's interesting, but the chemistry path just really sucked me in, and I just wanted to know more. And so I had changed my degree plan to get a chemistry major, and my plan was to go into medical laboratory sciences with that. That
okay.
kind of changed in terms of paths when I lost my vision.
Mm,
It is not the most accessible field for the blind. I think there's a lot of growth that needs to happen there in order for it to be so.
right.
There's so much that's done visually. There's a lot of machinery involved that is all touch screens, no accessibility built in.
Mm,
Um, and after talking to um, some of the people that are part of that program at my school that help lead you into that program, and also talking to the medical laboratory science schools themselves, there was just no practicality to getting a career, even if I made it through school. And
oh,
to that point, they'd never had anyone, even with low vision, get through the courses, let alone someone who
wow.
had as much vision loss as I do. And while I could have stayed there and pushed and tried to make it happen, I also wanted to be able to come out of it with a career. That kind of needed
Right.
to be one of my main goals. So I decided to move things around a bit. I would love to see that change eventually, but
Yeah.
it wasn't the fight that I was ready to go for at that time. So I
Right. Right.
started looking at how I could continue keeping, chemistry, which I love, and staying on a path that would be work for me. And I found out that
Right.
my college had environmental chemistry as an option.
Mm.
And being as environmental science and the health of our environment is something that's a strong value for me. It ended up really being a very, very wonderful fit for me.
So what is your dream to do with your degree when you finish up school?
I mean, I don't think I have a one and done dream at this point. I think it's more, I'm thinking that EPA could be a good option, or working with something like Denver Water, or you know Rocky Mountain National Forest with their soils, or something like
Oh
that would
yeah.
all be really great options. But there really is a lot out there that degree can be used in.
Right.
Even some of like the Army Corps, or the Navy will have civilian openings sometimes where they utilize those types of jobs. And so I don't want to limit myself when there might, to one option, when there might be something
Absolutely.
out
Yeah.
there that might fit me much better in the long run.
That's really super smart of you, because of that. Where do you know, have you met other people who are blind or visually impaired in this field?
Not environmental chemistry specifically, but chemistry, yes. My
Okay.
independent science, who I work for, they have several blind chemists that work with them.
And that's a fairly new position for you, correct?
Yes, I've only been part of their team for about a month as well, or so,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more.
And this is a very coveted job. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I actually got an email from somebody that even before we were going to have you on the podcast, that wanted everybody to know that you had gotten this position and how exciting it was. So that's really, really awesome. I think now my throat's going to go. You are playing it down, but it really is an awesome job that you landed in. So it's true. What you're doing is really, really phenomenal. So I wanted to ask you, and maybe you don't have an answer for this, but how do we get kids, and it's not just kids that are blind and visually impaired. I mean, I feel like it's across the board in America, but how do we get, but especially blind and visually impaired kiddos, to get more excited about the STEM program?
Oh, goodness. I think a lot of it can be hard when with the kiddos. You have to find stuff that is going to intrigue them and fascinate them and make them want to learn more, but still keep it within parameters that they can understand. And sometimes that's hard to do, but there's so many projects, whether it be chemistry or physics or biology, that can really be put together to make that experience fun for them. I think the challenge for our blind kiddos is that a lot of times they aren't given the opportunity to do the hands-on. A lot of times in school, for example, they might be given an assistant, or they might be partnered up with someone who do all of the hands-on work, and then are just given the data and have to interpret the data. And I think in some places there's a fear of liability. There's a fear of, oh my gosh, what if they get hurt? And that's the truth among anyone, right, that's in school, that's doing these experiments. Right. But there's a lot of fear around that, and that can actually make it harder to find the tools that might make them be able to be included in all of that. And in the long run, it makes it less fun, which makes them less inclined to want to pursue that further on down the road. And I think that's where it needs to change, is that hands-on needs to be there for them.
And I do have to say, I don't know if you've heard this term, but I pulled the blind card when I was in high school, and it was a biology class or something where we were supposed to dissect. I'm pretty sure it was I don't remember if it was a frog or what. I don't remember what it was, but I could not handle it at all on any level. And because when I'm a vegetarian, and it wasn't just mentally and physically, I just could not go there. And I actually asked my mom, could you kind of take this on and get me out of having to do this? And she did. And, she pulled the blind card, and for those out there in the audience, it's, and I am ashamed of it. I don't do it very often in my life, but I did not know how to get out of doing it without pulling that blind card. And even to this day, I would not want to do that. But when you're saying kids, blind and visually impaired kids, are not getting the hands-on exposure, I exactly that. So my mom, whatever she wrote or whoever she talked to, what I did is then I was still in the room when it was all going on, but I just, I took the notes and I translated the data. And so that was my part of being part of that team, which that's the part I love doing anyway. So it went right along with that. But I also, in other organizations that I've worked with, we have worked with schools that set up STEM laboratories and things like that, and where we had large groups of kids coming in and out, doing the different activities. And there was not a single blind or visually impaired kid there. But the one thing I did notice, because I helped set it up, is that these are not very accessible on any level. And so do you think that would be one of the first steps, is even making some of these STEM projects accessible. Like maybe that's why kiddos are not going into this field as much as maybe they would like to, is because it's an accessibility thing.
That is one of the bigger pieces of it. I mean, you have to look at it from some different points of view, and the setup is just one piece of that. If we look at say if you walk into a chemistry lab, you have to figure out where the fume hoods are. You have to figure out where the chemicals are being kept. There's usually one fume hood that's designated for waste of the materials when the experiment is done, and all of those are labeled usually with they either have something printed on them that says whether it's for organic or aqueous waste, things like that, or for solid waste, or someone will just write something on there with a Sharpie or whatever the case may be. But if you go feel inside that fume hood, all you can feel is a bunch of different containers, and you certainly don't want to be touching that with your bare hands because so braille in that case wouldn't be a good option because chemicals can be spilled and things like that. But trying to find a way to create an accessible laboratory no matter what kind of laboratory it is one step that can be really difficult. Can you find where your glassware is? Are you able to keep things organized, and can anyone find where those specific measurements, like if you need a certain size of beaker or graduated cylinder or volumetric flask, like can you find those in the lab? It's not always super obvious, and you certainly don't want to knock over a bunch of glassware in the process of trying to find a specific one. So, and then when you get to the chemicals, again, they're usually very well labeled because I think the majority of chemicals, for example, are all transparent, aqueous, clear liquids. But they're not all the same thing. And so they're very clearly labeled, but not in a way that makes it easy for blind people to know what they are. So for me, for example, in a class, I have to rely on my reader scribe to go find the chemical that we're looking for because there's just no way for me to identify it without help at this point. So, accessibility is definitely a concern in the labs, and I think it can be one of the biggest barriers that keeps blind people from pursuing that career, because it is kind of a tooth and nail fight in terms of trying to make things accessible. I know my school has done a really good job. We have a talking lab quest that I utilize most days and other equipment. But at the same time, despite the amount of things that my college has purchased in order to make it so that me and other blind people can perform as equally as possible in those labs, if they tried to get as much as possible, it honestly is more than their budget allows for. And that creates its own barrier as well as is the cost of some of the equipment to make things accessible. So, you run into a lot of those barriers, and that's where I tend to get to where if things were different, if every company and everything that was made was built from the ground up so that it was inclusive to all, whether it be deaf, blind, mobility impairments, neurological impairments, whatever the case may be, able to be used by someone. Say if someone only has one arm to work with, like they should still be able to do chemistry. It's like, how do we make this just a universal design that makes it work for everyone? And how different would science be if things were done that way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're talking to the choir here. I have a little saying. I have that the only thing that makes somebody disabled is lack of access, no matter what it is. And once that access is created, and like you said, if it's created from the ground up, like if the lab was built from the onset to be accessibility for everybody, then it wouldn't matter if you had a disability or not. And I mean, that's my dream of the whole entire world, is that we need to, whenever we create anything whatsoever, we need to kind of go back to the drawing board and quit creating things the same over and over again. because all that does is puts up barriers for people with a disability, no matter what it is. Whereas we need to go back from the beginning. And it's like, how do we create, regardless if it's sidewalks to schools to labs, if we created an accessible environment from the get-go, then the whole, like you said, like how many more people would be able to get into this field that you love so much if it was accessible? And what are we missing out on by having these barriers and people aren't getting, becoming scientists that, who knows what's hidden behind those brains, but they never get a chance to express it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and sometimes I think that people don't know what they might be missing either. I think that there's an automatic assumption that because someone is blind, that they can't perceive things the way that someone who does it in the quote unquote normal way does. And to some extent that might be true, but I think what's important to acknowledge is that we might see something that they can't. Because we're looking at it, we're looking at it from a different point of view. And it might open doors that they might not otherwise have seen because we're looking at it from that different perspective.
Exactly. Wow. And I know that is, it's a goal for a lot of people. But I think we have, even in my lifetime, there's been a lot of things that have changed. But every time, like, I meet somebody like you and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 2022. We should have figured this out by now, but we still have so much more to do. And then also because the world and technology is changing so fast that on some levels, I think that's really good. But on other things, I feel like we're going backwards sometimes.
Yeah, I think that sometimes the speed at which we are growing in like the technology field and different fields like that, it does kind of leave certain groups of people in the dust. If those things were growing with inclusivity in mind, I think that would be different. Maybe we'd be going a fraction slower, but everyone would be able to use it. And I think that if that were the goal, man, I think our society would be on a whole nother level if that were the goal. But I do think that speed is sometimes a problem, that speed at which they're trying to grow and do more and do more and do more. I'm like, yeah, let's do more, but let's do more for everybody, not just one group of people.
Right. Exactly. And find new ways to do it. I'm a big believer that, it's mental illness continuing to do the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Like, I think we just really need to switch, pivot, or whatever you want to say, call it, into thinking different when we're creating, no matter what it is. So with your career, do you see yourself making some of those changes?
I would like to. I think that access and inclusion needs to be there for everybody. And if it's not already there, if there's a way for me to make it, why not? I've already done that for a work study job that I participated in a couple semesters ago. I wanted to do this job. We weren't sure it was going to work. In order to make it accessible, I designed a frame for the microplate that I needed to use in that work study. And,
wow.
It was what I needed for me at the time, but potentially it's something that could be used for other people too. And it was just made on the 3D printer. If we have templates of stuff that can be made for people to just be able to access the code and go plug it into a 3D printer, how great would that be to have accessibility right at people's fingertips like that?
Absolutely. So it kind of sounds like you're already changing it.
I'm
things
trying.
and opening those doors. Yeah. Well, and I do feel like I've had a lot of conversations about this, about it does really rely on our shoulders, right? If we want to create change, we cannot wait for other people to do it. We need to find ways within whatever role we are playing in this world. If we can start creating and making those changes, then I think it does sort of feed out into other areas, as well as the next person that comes behind us might have a little bit easier path, but also they have something to build on. So the next person behind you, will take that, 3D printout and be like, this is awesome. But wait a minute, if I tweak it a little bit, it will work better, or, and
Well,
so
it's really
I think
about
it's really
allowing for
amazing.
that growth, right? Because,
Right.
just by making this one thing that I needed for myself, it's like planting a seed, but it's not a
Mm-hmm.
tree, it's a seed. And so if, you put
Yes.
that out there and someone else has access to that, then they can build upon that. And then pretty soon you have a sprout, and then someone else might get a hold of that. And, for all you know, in the next 25 years, someone might have made something that just pops stuff out for people in 5 minutes. You just don't know where it might grow
Absolutely.
to, but it allows for that growth to happen. And I think that's how it needs to happen, is for that growth to occur, because what I'm seeing right now, I can't see what's going to happen in the future, but it might grow into
Right.
something that can benefit a lot of people. And that's where it really comes in handy, just for people to have access to these different ways of making the world accessible. Is it doesn't just benefit one person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of tools, what's the number one tool that you use on a day-to-day basis that's kind of your most important tool?
Number one tool, huh? Right now, I kind of have two, if that doesn't push the boundaries too
Okay.
much. But
No, that's fine.
one of them is the Talking Lab Quest, and that allows me to use balances, pH probes, temperature probes, things like that can plug into it, and that way it gives me the data from those tools in an auditory manner. So I can find out what the
Awesome.
temperature is. I don't have to worry about trying to read a thermometer. It tells me what the temperature is. Same thing with the balance,
Right.
same thing with the pH probe. It gives me that data in real time. The other thing is probably as simple as it sounds, notch syringes right now. I have to get a certain measurement of liquid. I use a notch
Oh,
syringe. It's very
yeah.
simple, very not fancy, but at the same time, it is an important instrument for me to be able to, get specific measurements of chemicals on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So do your classmates also use those tools, or is this specifically for you?
No, this is specific to me. In the chemistry lab,
Okay.
most people use pipettes. Class A
Okay.
pipettes are pretty common at this level for measurement, so that you can get a very specific volume of liquid. Pipettes,
Okay.
like much of the chemistry equipment, has a line that's painted on the glassware that you have to use your eyes to figure out when to stop, which doesn't work very
Okay.
well when your eyes don't work properly.
Right. Right.
And so, they measure out their chemicals in a different manner. And then, when it comes
Okay.
to, I use a temperature probe connected to the Talking Lab Quest. They just use a thermometer, or they just use,
Right.
a regular balance that gives them a visual readout, or they just use, a pH probe that connects to a computer that they just read off the screen, or collect the data on the screen. And so,
Okay.
they're doing all of their stuff in a visual manner, and the Talking Lab Quest allows me to get that same data in a manner that I can utilize without relying on someone else.
Oh, okay. The reason I ask is because I have found that sometimes with accessible tools, my classmates or even my coworkers, even, as I entered my career, found that the tools that I was using was actually made their life easier. Like it enhanced what they were doing. So that's why I asked, is that sometimes the tools that we have to use, because it's the only way we can have accessibility, actually turns out to be a good tool for everybody.
Well, I mean, and that's kind of the definition of universal design that we talked about earlier, right?
Yes.
Is that
Yeah,
while it
exactly.
may have initially been put in place for one specific reason, it ends up benefiting a lot more people than that. So if you take something like the
Right.
Talking Lab Quest, it may have initially been designed to allow someone who's blind to be able to get auditory readings. But if you consider someone who has a different print disability, maybe they're dyslexic, or maybe
Right.
there's some other reason why they have a harder time with a visual with visual print, it might be a better option for them to be getting that information auditorily than visually. Same thing with the syringes. I use them because I can have a tactile marking to get my chemicals. But if you have someone who has maybe their hand is structured differently, or maybe they only have one hand, or maybe which would make with a pipette using the bulb that would normally be used with it harder to do. There
Right.
may be a number of reasons why using a syringe, and there's, I'm sure, plenty of things out there that I can't even think
Right.
of why that might work better for someone rather than a pipette. So it definitely, I mean, that's what part of all of this is about, is it doesn't have to be just for one population of people.
Right.
Even when you're creating accessibility, there might be uses for it for a lot of other people that we can't even think of right now, that makes it
Right.
easier for them to also achieve their goals.
Right. Right. That's great. Well, what gets you motivated when you're having a bad day?
I don't know. I mean, Augie, my dog, is pretty good at getting me motivated.
Oh,
He's like, I can be super grumpy when I get up first thing in the morning, and he's just super excited. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in 8 hours. Let me come give you so much love you can't even stand it." And he changes my mood pretty quickly. That's always a good
oh,
way to start the day. It's great to have him running up to you, so happy to see you.
yeah,
Turns my mood around really quickly. Um, Sometimes I'll put on some music, dance around in the morning a little bit, and I don't know. It just kind of depends, I guess.
yeah,
I don't know if that's what you
yeah.
were looking for.
No, it is. It is. Because a lot of our audience out there, they've sent a message like, "Oh, that's great that so and so got to do this, but it's because they're wealthy, or they're super smart, or this kind of dropped into their lap." And I'm like, yes, but we're all human, and I think we all
Hmm.
have hard days, we all have good days. And I think
Yeah.
I love when people share, like, you know what can get them back on track. And I know as a student, and it's been a number of years since I was a student, at least at a university. I will always forever be a student, I hope, but in life. But it's a lot. It's a lot, or at least it was for me. And
Yeah.
I was not one of those wealthy students. I worked full time. I went to school full time, and I look back now. It's like, how did I ever do that? But you're kind of in the moment. But
Yeah.
I
Well, I
agree.
mean, I think tea is definitely one of them. Tea is like my cure all
Oh,
for everything in life. I'm not the same person until I've had my first cup of tea in the morning. That
oh,
is probably my favorite way to just be ready in the beginning of the day, because it's, for me, it's kind of a meditation process. I do like the whole thing. I have the teapot, and I put the hot water in it, and I get the teapot warm while I'm boiling my water, and then I have my tea leaves. I do like the loose leaf tea leaves, and like, it's a whole process for
oh,
me to make my tea in the morning, and it's
yeah.
honestly almost meditative. And that first cup of tea, oh my gosh, there's nothing like it for me. It just makes me such a happy person. That's It's the best thing ever.
What's your favorite tea?
Earl Grey is my favorite.
Earl Grey is. Wow,
I drink
that's
other kinds
awesome.
too, but first thing in the morning, I have to have my Earl Grey. It's wonderful.
Yeah. You mentioned your guide dog, Augie. Can you share what it was like that very first time you walked with him?
If I'm brutally honest, a little terrifying.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that very first time, uh, you know, putting the trust in him fully, not having the tactile feedback coming from the cane that I had gotten used to having all the time. There's definitely, you have to take those first few steps and just fully trust. And that was hard. That very first walk was hard, but it was also exhilarating. Like, I was walking at a pace that was, much faster, which I loved because I was always a fast walker, and before I lost my vision. And the more I walked with him, the better it got. And honestly, it's been a wonderful fit for me. It's not for everyone. There's plenty of people who
Right.
prefer canes, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I still use my cane all the time. When I'm in the lab, obviously I'm not walking around with my dog. He's under a table taking a nap while I'm getting around with my cane. But I do, it does make getting just around campus from point A to point B when I just need to get somewhere in a rush, but don't really need to know everything around me in that moment. It makes it a really great method of travel for me. And I'll be honest, the companionship's pretty great too.
Yeah, it definitely. Well, Charis, what would you like to take away from today to our audience?
I think the main thing is if you are interested in science, if you want to do science, do science, get into science. Don't let the struggle be what deters you from your dream. If that is what you really want to do, go into it head first, knowing that there are going to be challenges, and help make it more accessible so that more people can follow you. Is it going to be easy? No, it's not going to be easy at all, but it might be easier for the next person. When you've put in the work to help make it more so. So, don't let it stop you, because the more we can show people what blind people are capable of, I think the less stigma there will be of people thinking that blind people can't do something in that field. So let's just make it more commonplace for blind people to be in the sciences. I think that'll be a good thing.
That's awesome. Well, Charis, I've been asking you a ton of questions. I always give an opportunity for my guests to ask me a question. Do you have a question for me? It can be anything, or you've just been curious.
What's your favorite food?
Oh, that's good. Wow. I love ethnic food. Like, I love, anything but true ethnic food. So like if I go out for Mexican food, I like to be more authentic. But I absolutely love Indian food because of all the spices and the textures, and also because they have so many vegetarian dishes, which I'm a vegetarian. Yes. So if
that sounds lovely. A friend introduced me to that recently, and I fell in love with the saag paneer.
And I think especially in the winter, I feel like it's warming, like all the spices they use. And now you're making me hungry. So, well, Charis, would you like to share with our audience either a program or something or a place that has touched your life that you would like to share? Like, I know you mentioned you went through the Colorado Center for the Blind. I mentioned that you got a scholarship through the National Federation of the Blind. Mm-hmm. But is there a shout out you would like to give, either a program or an organization or a human being on their own? Feel free to.
Does it have to be blindness related?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. So my school is currently, there's a program at my school called the Epic Scholars Program that I want to give a shout out to them, just because they are paving the way for helping create support systems so that students who grow up in foster care or are homeless when they are kids, or are in kinship programs or anything like that, are able to get the support they need to actually make it through college. And they have put that together, I think, is just so wonderful to help students who might otherwise not be able to get through college actually get through college and find the resources they need to do so, and have a support system around them to help them do that, I think is just absolutely amazing and inspirational. And, I have to give them a shout out because it is huge.
You have their website?
Well, it's part of the MSU. Sorry, it's through them. So it's msudenver.edu/epic-scholars.
Well, Charis, thank you so much for coming on today. I hope you feel better. I hope you get over this crud you have, and you have the rest of your break is beautiful, and you get to spend it with family and friends. I really, really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I also definitely want to give a shout out to Audio Information Network of Colorado, because without all of you, and you know who you are, you work so hard on the back end to make this podcast available week after week. And I really, really, really appreciate it. I also want to give a thank you to all of our volunteers who give thousands of hours of your skills in reading newspapers and magazines and all the different things that you read for listeners just like me and Charis. And we really, really, really appreciate it. We have the best volunteers in the world, and I always want to give you guys a shout out. So we really, really appreciate it. So everybody, check in next week with us. We'll have another amazing guest. And all of you out there who have kiddos that are blind and visually impaired, or if you are a teenager or even a young adult or not even young, if you are interested in science, I really hope that Charis' story today will inspire you to, set aside your fears and to explore. That's what life is all about. So everybody out there, remember to be kind to yourself and find a way to be kind to someone else. It's good for your soul. And we will see you next week.